Welcome, investigator. Evil is on the rise. Crime is escalating. Our mission is to eliminate the crime by exposing evil, examine why it manifests, and highlight the brave souls that confront it every day. Join us as we work together to bring justice to every victim. Welcome to All Things Crime. Here's your host, Jared Bradley.
Hey, everybody, it's Jared. Welcome to another episode of All Things Crime. Excited to be here and excited that you're here with us. And while we're here, make sure to hit subscribe and like, and definitely share this episode, and even give us a review. That would really help us and help other people find the show. Excited to be here. Like I said, I have an amazing guest, Brian Armstrong. And Brian, I'm going to have you, kind of talk about your career and everything as we go through some of the topics here. But the original reason that, that you had a post on LinkedIn, and I don't know about all of you that are out there listening or watching this on YouTube or Rumble or wherever you're at. I don't know if you guys are on LinkedIn, but I'll tell you what, if you want professionals and actually find the people that are really deep into not only solving crime, but talking about it, and on the news, and anybody that's a professional is on LinkedIn. And so I'm not giving a plug here for LinkedIn. I don't certainly not endorsed by them, but
I got to say, LinkedIn is underrated for certain things. The conversations we get in on some of my posts, at least, I mean, they're great conversations. And you look at the names, and there's some of the biggest names in the country. You know them. There's everybody from people from the government to high-level law enforcement to other journalists. It's some of the best conversations out there on LinkedIn. You just got to find the right people. That's the problem.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I agree. So, well, let's, Brian, let's get right into this particular post is what caught me. And again, you're Brian Armstrong on LinkedIn. You also have your website there, and we'll make sure that's in the show notes and everything. Sure. But here's the post that I saw, and I'm just going to read this so everybody understands exactly what we're talking about. So it says, a repeat offender with 64 arrests was shot and killed while trying to break into a woman's home in Chicago. The man was attempting to break into an apartment. Multiple people were inside, including children and a legally armed woman, which is really important. She pulled out a firearm and shot the man twice. The man's 64, that just blows my mind. I could not get over this. 64 prior arrests included domestic violence, aggravated battery, which are two, especially those are particular against women. You would think that everybody would be basically just saying, this guy was not a good guy. But aggravated battery on a police officer and violating an order of protection. The incident appears to be domestic related, and it is another example of the failure of Illinois' no cash bail policy. It also reminds us that a restraining order is nothing more than a piece of paper. Boy, how true is that? In a separate incident, the intended victim managed to wrestle away, this is a separate incident. The intended victim managed to wrestle away his attacker's gun and fired back. These two gun self-defense cases remind us that everyone should learn to use a gun, even if they don't own one. With 64 prior arrests, the failure of the Safety Act and the court in addressing repeated criminal behavior is evident. All right, Brian, that had to be one of the more packed LinkedIn posts I have ever seen. And, immediately when I read that, I was like, geez, man, this guy is spot on. So that's when I reached out to you and connected with you. And I'm so glad that I did. Let's talk about this first case. A repeat offender with 64 prior arrests. First of all, I understand Chicago's crazy. And
right.
So some of the people that are in positions of prominence in Chicago, especially, are just, I don't know what goes through their minds when they think of, this guy's only been arrested 63 times. Let's let him out.
Unfortunately,
First of all,
that's way more common than people realize.
Can you explain that if you can?
Well, in Illinois, under the Safety Act, one of the provisions of it is whoever the offender is that they've got in, they're talking about bail, they have to be able to prove that that person is going to go out and commit another violent crime towards a specific individual as part of it. That's a pretty high bar, a pretty high standard to have to meet. So we've got multiple repeat offenders with felonies, other violent previous crimes, but if they're unrelated, a lot of cases the judge can't take into account. Was just reading, just came out in the last few days that the Kane County sheriff, which is, so you got Cook County, then you got DuPage, and you got Kane going to the west. He's arrested and put more people in jail for failure to appear in court, which, if, of course, they have no relation to go to court. Then they were arrested for other things, or have in jail for other things. That's a sad statistic.
Yeah, I actually read something that said there's more people in jail in certain jurisdictions like Cook County for failure to appear in court than there are for the actual offense.
Right.
And so they said basically what's happening is these offenders, they're assaulting a police officer, like this particular guy that we read about, domestic assault. So this guy's basically, I don't know if he's married or not to this lady that shot him, but at least that's his girlfriend, and so he's in there to assault her, and probably has in the past. So he assaults a female, gets arrested, gets put in jail. They have this no cash bail, so he's immediately let out and then given a court date. Now, all of this is supposedly so that they reduce the jail population, correct?
Well, not reduce the jail population. They're saying that it's just a lot of people disenfranchised. That seems to be the favorite term of Mayor Johnson, and can't afford to get out of jail, and they're unjustly being held in jail because they can't afford the bond. I mean, the truth is that they should be held in jail because they did violent crimes. And the judges in a lot of cases don't have the discretion. There was another case that just went before the state courts, and they said the judge couldn't hold somebody under the Safety Act, but the judge wanted to. So even in his discretion, he wanted to hold the guy, but since they didn't meet the requirements of what's in the act, he couldn't hold him. So the guy walked.
So essentially what you're saying then is the state politicians from the state of Illinois have essentially tied the hands of all the courts. So even if the judge was not a crazy leftist that wanted to let everybody out of jail, they couldn't hold this guy, is what you're saying.
Nope. And it's happened in a lot more cases than just that. I mean, matter of fact, that case was barely a blip on the radar. That's another thing that's disappointing about this, locally. It shouldn't be a joke, but we joke about it. I mean, some of this isn't news. It's like, it's Tuesday. It just happened. That was in and out of the news cycle fast. It barely made the news cycle.
Yeah, that's insane. So I know that most homicide is, or at least a significant part of it is male on male crime. But I think out of the assaults, and you have a lot more stats on this kind of stuff than I do, but assaults, especially domestic violence, it has to be up in the 90 percentile. It's male on female crime. Is that, am I off base on that?
I don't know what the official statistics are, but another issue you have with male and female crime or assaults or violence is it's underreported. It's way underreported. In fact, I just had a conversation about this with somebody this morning. A lot of the victims don't call the police. They don't look for help. They're intimidated. It goes on for months or years. The domestic violence situation is out of control, and people don't realize how bad it is. It's way worse than people realize.
Oh yeah. Well, do you remember that there's a particular, I can't even remember where it was, but there was multiple offenders, but there was one kid in particular. I think he was the trigger puller, and because he was underage, he was basically just laughing about things and just. I think one of his statements was, "Hey, don't worry about it, mom and dad. I'll be home soon."
Yeah.
And
Some of
and
them are
he,
just brazen about it.
yeah,
They
they
know
were,
there's not going to be repercussions, and they're just brazen about it.
and they had killed multiple people, if I understand, if
I'm
I
going to be
remember
honest.
right. But
I don't know which case it is, but because I've seen a few of them lately like that, where the kids got up in court and he's essentially mocked the judge. There was one the other day. I don't remember where it was at. In fact, the kid turned around, squared off, looked right at the camera, and just gave it this big smile, like it was almost like a "go f you." Um, it,
yeah,
it it's disgusting.
well, this particular case that I'm thinking of, that kid lost his smile really quick when the judge said, "We're going to try you as an adult, and we are not letting you out." So you were,
And it wasn't in Illinois or California or New York, I bet.
yeah. Yeah, well, unfortunately, even in some of the more conservative states, there are little pockets of
Right,
blue, if you will, and
right.
uh, there's some fairly uh,
Austin's a
let's
perfect example. Look at the state of Texas, but then look at Austin. I'm a firearms instructor in Texas too. I go back and forth. You
uh,
look at Austin, and it's like, can we just wall the city of Austin off from the rest of the state, or just get rid of it? Yeah, they swing way far left and liberal. Um,
yeah,
I think that was the case where the guy had an AK-47 put in his car window, and they arrested the guy for shooting him. The guy that was in the car, and that should have been a clear cut and dry self defense case, and wasn't.
yeah. It's amazing how many cities I look at that. So as I travel the country, I travel all the time. In fact, I just got back from Oklahoma City last night, and um, in these cities, like, it can be a really conservative state, but like, I live in Utah, and Utah has to be one of the most conservative states in the entire country. But if you look at Salt Lake City, there are some real nut jobs in Salt Lake City. I mean, it's crazy. They're the lawyer, or the mayor and the county mayor, are some of the most liberal mayors in the entire country, and it's not something you would expect, but um, when you start getting these little pockets of you know people that are extremely liberal, they go out of their way to make sure that they elect people that truly represent them, even in the middle of um, the conservative people that are surrounding them. And it's
Yeah,
almost
and
like they're trying to make a statement or something. I think Chicago is a great example, like Cook County. I think if you took Cook County out of the equation, Illinois would be a pretty conservative state, wouldn't it?
took Cook County and Lake County out. And the problem we've got though is DuPage County, for example, which is the first one of the West. It used to be hard Republican. It's going more towards Democrat. And um, a couple of things that you discussed. One, the politicians seem to. I work with a lot of politicians and with their campaigns, and when I see their campaigns, I'm looking at who they're surrounded with, and more, I'm starting to figure out why we have some of the bills we're having and some of the loopholes. They surround themselves essentially with an echo chamber, which to a certain extent I understand. We all do that. Uh, but then the feedback they're getting isn't neutral or isn't even to the right. Uh, there's no balance there in a lot of these bills. And you take Austin, or a city like Austin that is real liberal. Chicago's another good one. They'll come out to Chicago to do a crime in the burbs, and then they'll run back to Cook County because they know it's safer. Same state, same underlying laws, but it's so much more liberal, and the judges are so much more lenient that they know they can, go out to the suburbs, and if they get back to Cook County, it's almost like they got back to another country, and then they're not going to get caught.
Oh yeah. Well, it's I don't know if we've talked about this or not, but I'm actually the president of MVAC Systems, and the
Okay.
MVAC it's a DNA collection system. So um, it's amazing how many more agencies that are suburbs, either counties or cities, that are actually suburbs of these big cities, as opposed to the big cities themselves. I don't know if it's a matter of funding or just lack of will for a lot of these big cities and, these bigger, it's probably they just can't get funding. The
Right.
police departments from these big cities like Chicago PD, for example, with as much crime as Chicago has, they should probably have, I don't know, a half dozen MVACs and, spread throughout the city in order to help fight the crime. They don't have any, but they're, the suburbs are where they're starting to get placed because of exactly what you're just saying. They're, the suburbs are like, man, the spillover from the crime from the inner city is starting to get out of the suburbs. And I think these gangs are getting more and more bold. And gangs, when I
Oh,
say,
absolutely.
or just criminals in general are becoming more and more bold. And exactly what you just said, they're basically going out to the suburbs where a lot of the money is and a lot of the, whether they're just want to burglar or whatever, they want to commit whatever kind of crime. And then as soon as they commit the crime, before they get caught, they bust back into the city so that there's less chance of them getting caught.
Well, not only that, the people in the suburbs typically have their guard down more. They don't see it coming. They're easier targets. You see it at the gas stations a lot. You see it with robberies, with carjackings, and the city of Chicago. You brought up the money for some of these systems. One thing I don't understand is they're so far understaffed. Let's face it, a lot of these major cities are understaffed. What are you doing with that money you could be spending on a salary? To me, why don't you put into equipment like that can help you do your job? Why don't you put into some training? I mean, the training is horrible, horrible. Some of these guys, the only time they should is to go qualify once a year. Where's that extra money going that you should be paying for the 25 or 30%, in some cases staffing that you're down? That's a huge chunk of change. Let's put into some equipment that you can, in its essence, it's a force multiplier. Maybe put some of these people behind jail, but instead it's not happening.
Yeah. Well, honestly, it's just this mentality that a lot of people on leftists have. For example, I was active duty military during the Clinton administration, and it was interesting. I was with the 101st Airborne Division, and granted, they're light infantry, but there were some tanks and stuff like that on base for months on end in one particular year. Now you would think for a tank is, I don't know, millions of dollars. So you have all this equipment sitting there. You would want the soldiers that are assigned to operate this equipment and go to war if it came to it, that they would actually train on that equipment. Right. I know for a fact that there was like a year that these guys never left the motor pool. Their tanks never left the motor pool. And as far as like the only thing they were allowed to do for maintenance is they would pull the tank forward enough that the entire track would rotate once. So they'd pull it forward about 25 feet, make sure everything is functioning right, the engine fired up, grease everything, and then they'd pull it back to its parking spot, and then it would sit there for another month.
Yep.
And so these guys, so that mentality, now they siphoned all that money that should have been spent with these guys going down to the range, going out to the field, actually training, becoming proficient in their equipment. All that money was siphoned off, and it was put into other places around the federal government, into different programs and just things that most of us would look at and just say that's a complete waste of our taxpayer dollars.
Yep.
And I think that exact same mentality is what has come down to or kind of infiltrated into a lot of our police agencies, and not necessarily the police agency, but the city council and those kind of people.
All the way around.
Yeah.
I can give you two perfect examples. We'll go back to Chicago.
Okay.
The security guard that they've hired for the CTA, they're worthless. They're not armed. They're not trained. Something goes wrong on the CTA or the train system. I mean, the red line that's a death trap. They stand there and watch. Everybody's video recording these days. We see it over and over again. Something will happen, so they'll get attacked, and then you've got these guys in security gear standing, clothing standing behind them, and they're just staring at them. And the other we've got up here is violence interrupters, or peacekeepers, they're called. And Johnson brags about how much money he's put into this program. Some of these people are ex-cons. Pritzker, which it got buried in the news, I think for his last week or the week before, Pritzker was in a picture with one of them. And, they both said, hey, how great the system is and how well it works. And all these people they've employed, look at who you're employing. And are they really doing anything? They're just, a lot of them just saying I'm collecting a paycheck. And again, you see this over and over again. And we're seeing more videos of it come out. And instead of doing something, they're standing there. So that really, what's that money going to? It's going to nothing. So you may see Johnson says, "Oh, I've created all these jobs." Well, you've created jobs, but you might as well go in and burn the money because it's not doing any good at the end of the day.
Yeah, just pay people to stay home. Basically, it'd be more effective.
Exactly, and it looks good to his voter base. To his voter base, all they see is, "Hey, he created all these jobs, and these people are having an income, and he's employing them." He's not employing them. Maybe put that money into an education or put it into some other system. We see people trying to do short-term solutions that aren't long-term answers to these things. Let's reallocate the money again for training for the people, training for the police department. This money could be better spent than what's being spent, but it looks good on paper. It looks good on a soundbite, and it looks good to the people that are voting for him. And same thing for Pritzker, for that matter.
Yeah, well, I think unfortunately for a lot of these people, I think their scam is being exposed because what has happened in Washington, D.C., I think has basically just completely obliterated anything other than saying, if you want to reduce crime, this is how you do it. And it's kind of the same model that Rudy Giuliani, enacted back in the 90s, back when New York was just New York was an absolute cesspool in the early 90s until the people finally got so fed up. They elected Rudy Giuliani, and he came in with a hammer and basically said, we're going to reduce the crime in this city. And I see a lot of similarities between what happened in New York in the 90s and what's happening in Washington, D.C. right now.
Yeah, and everybody made a big deal about them going into Washington D.C. It was in the news cycle for a little bit, and it dropped crime, and now we haven't heard anything. So where's all this doom and gloom that everybody predicted? Instead, crime's gone down, people can get out again. Chicago has got areas, River North, Gold Coast. We used to never worry about going out in those areas, and now I was at a law enforcement function a couple nights ago, and we were talking about it. The areas we would used to go, we won't step foot in now after 8:30, 9 o'clock. Won't do it. The odds of getting robbed or injured they're too high. And downtown Chicago now is starting to really see it. Their licenses in the Mag Mile, the big tourist trap area, is at a 10-year low. It's dropped by 50% in the last 10 years.
So how did you, you were a cop for a long time. Tell us how you got started.
Actually, I wasn't in law enforcement. I was a firefighter paramedic. Yeah. For years, always was in the firearms industry. I owned my own business for 20 some years. Did this stuff on the side, and a while back, just got tired of the system, tired of the way things work. And the final straw was I did a post on Facebook, and the post they censored and said, well, you can't say that. I said, well, I'm not one of those you want to do that to, because if you put a mountain in front of me, I'm going to blow it up, find a way around it, or go through it. And went out and started writing articles for a bunch of national publications. Was miserable. You're talking about somebody that barely passed English. Now, reach a couple million people a month there, actually more than that, even on social media. And my whole goal is just a voice to be heard. I get a lot of messages from people that say, hey, you're, totally believe in what you're saying. I wish I could say it, but I can't because of work, or I can't because of my neighbor. And I'm not backing off. Somebody's got to say this for the rest of us. I've got a couple friends, as of the Charlie Kirk thing now, that aren't talking to me. which
Mm.
is surprising. Somebody's got to speak up, and people are afraid to do that. If we don't, nothing's going to change. It's going to be the same old thing it used to be. And you got that small, really minority making the biggest and most amount of noise. So, my mission was to kind of counter that. And one way I did it, as far as covering stories, most people going to an interview, one approach I take, I was down one of the NGOs, for example, in Texas for about 3 months undercover. I actually worked inside the NGOs. If you remember social media early last year, they had the reporters trying to get into the locked doors where these people were getting transferred through. I was actually in one of those facilities and saw it from the inside. And your perspective changes. You want to know your enemy. Don't like using that term, but know what you're up against. And there's no better way to do it than live it. So I did that. Done a lot of protesting with certain groups. And when I say protesting, literally protesting with them. Just want to see it from the other side. And it also is great for discussion. You're having a discussion, especially with somebody that's far left, and they'll go, well, you don't know, or, how do you know this? And I can whip out a picture of my phone or pull out documents and say, hey, I was there. I've seen it firsthand. You're not hearing it from, I did an interview with somebody or an interview of an interview, or I read it in a news story. And it goes one or two ways. It shuts the conversation down really quick because they don't have a counter for it, or it opens up a conversation, which was my whole goal. Right. Let's have a talk about it. We can have opposing views, and let's meet somewhere in the center, or try to at least. And that's how I ended up where I was at. And 10 years ago, you would ask me if I've been here. Not my wildest dreams, and here I am.
So that brings up a question, and I don't know if you have the answer to this, but I actually saw an interview between I always mispronounce his name, but it's Constantine. He's one of the hosts of Trigonometry, and he was talking with they had Tim Pool on as a guest, and they were saying they were kind of making the argument that there's crazies on both the right and the left, and
absolutely,
that there's a propensity for both extremes to get really violent. And the interesting thing to me was when Tim Pool basically said, yeah, but the problem is when you have guests on that are right leaning, that are conservative, that focus more on the Constitution and individual rights, and more importantly, individual accountability. He said you can have a conversation with people like that and actually have disagreements, but you can't do that on the left. If you have disagreements with them, they'll shut you down, and ultimately, if they can't shut you down, they'll get violent, which is exactly what happened with Charlie Kirk.
Yep.
Why is that?
Seen it firsthand.
Say that again.
I said I've seen it firsthand.
Okay. So describe it.
From what I can tell and from what I've experienced, the right seems to look at it a little bit more with logic. And I'm not saying all the right. Like you said, we both have our extremes. But somebody that leans far left, we talk about getting in the echo chamber. They really get in that echo chamber. And you can search for information and find information to believe whatever you want to believe and support your topic. I can give you an example 2 weeks ago where after Charlie Kirk got shot, I had got up real early that morning and got to the kids' social media before everything was taken down. And there's a image of him in what looks like his dorm room. I can't remember the color of shirt. It was a lighter color shirt. By the next day, that shirt had been photoshopped and said Trump across it. And there was two versions, one a red shirt, one a blue shirt. And a friend of mine had sent me that. Well, I say that loosely now because they haven't talked to me in a week and a half. And I replied right away to that and had the original photo. And when they had cropped it, they cropped it down to the point where they could just see his shirt. You could just see a little bit of the outline of what was behind it. And I had the full room photo and sent the room photo back. Well, that shut that down, but now we're on to the next subject. And it's like, okay. And they were literally attacking me. And if you read anything I put out there, I'm not one for an argument. I'm fact based. Here's the facts. If I don't know, I'm going to say I don't know. I'll stay in my lane. So now we're on to the next thing, same sort of situation, and it was emotional. This was by text, and you could tell though it was emotionally driven, and facts just did not matter. Same thing with some of the pro-Palestinian groups that have been inside. They facts don't matter. They're not going to listen to it. Some of their brochures, if you look at them, and you've looked at Marxism or looked at socialism and going back, they've basically rewritten that for the year 2025. They had one particular one I read, and I got to the back page, and that was during the DNC, and it occurred to me, like, wow, they've rewritten the playbook for modern age to get these people to suck in. And I equate this to the kids that don't have anything to do, or the kids that never got invited to anything in high school. You're talking about a group of individuals. Again, I'm not pointing fingers at everybody, but a large group of these individuals, this is their social life. This is what they do to get out of the house. Tesla is a perfect example of that when they were protesting Elon. This is their life. It's what they do. It's something to go around. You or I may go out to the bar and have a drink with friends. I go shooting. I go to festivals. For them, it's their social hour. And when that's your social hour and you've got like-minded people about you, they fire each other up and egg each other on. And that's where we're at. And I don't see that with the group on the right. We can disagree, and then we go have a barbecue and have a drink, and it's yesterday's news.
Well, in your experience, how is it that people reach a point where they literally believe that violence, physical violence, is justified based on the circumstances of whatever they're looking at?
And that one, especially the last 3 weeks, I got to tell you, I'm trying to figure out. Broadview up here has made the national news. It's a nice facility, and typically I would go to these and try and blend into the crowd. That one has become enough of a disaster that I didn't even attempt it. Especially the last 3, maybe 4 weeks, it's really been ratcheted up a notch. And what's motivating them? I'm gonna be honest, I haven't figured it out yet. It's really gone to a whole new level. It was getting bad, kind of a slope like this. Now the bad is on a much steeper slope, and I don't know what's triggered it or what's been the final straw with them. Maybe it's just the point they've been inside that echo chamber so long that that's all they hear, and their anger and their hatred for anybody that doesn't agree with them is just boiled over. But I don't see it. I don't see it with a big group of them. I don't see it getting better soon. I really don't.
Well, the question is going to be, and it's kind of like what there was a quote that I read from President Trump. He basically said, those of you that are turning to violence, he said, you need to be careful because you will push the other side to violence. And I don't think they understand that, I don't know. What is there? 400 million guns in United States and like 2 trillion rounds of ammunition, or something like that.
Yeah. And firearms, I'm a licensed firearm instructor in Illinois and in Texas. And I will say the last 3 to 4 weeks, I have seen a big uptick in private lessons. People that were borderline on renewals are now only get their renewals. And the people that are coming in do absolutely right. And one common thread above them is, I just want to be prepared. I'd rather just be left alone. I can't believe we've gotten to this point. And they're willing to talk. You can see it and you can hear it. And my classes are all small. The most I do is 5. So it helps to have, it's an open environment. People are more willing to talk and more willing to say why they're really there and what's really motivating them. And it's just the whole dynamics changed. And the people, Newsom and Pritzker and some of these governors and Johnson, they're fueling the fire. That's the one that's got me. And they know they're fueling the fire. I think, though, they're also fueling it because Pritzker and Newsom, they're going to make a presidential bid and they're testing the waters. And I
Yeah.
think they're trying to fire up their base. The thing is, they're firing up their base to a certain point that their base is now going nuts on some of these things. So somehow or another, it's got to be reined in, and it's got to start with them.
Well, there's also a common thread that goes between, the people that are looking at the the latest shooter, even the Charlie Cook shooter, and this guy that shot up the ICE
Down
facility in
Dallas.
Dallas
Yeah.
the other day. I saw in the news just before we started this conversation that there's riots at an ICE facility in the I can't remember the town, but it's in Illinois,
Broadview.
and yeah, but it's in the middle of a residential area,
Yep.
and you got all this rioting going on. So, and standoff with the ICE agents, and like what they're doing or not. Basically, these guys, these ICE agents and these law enforcement officers are all they're doing is upholding the law, which was written by the politicians.
Right.
And so, I understand in the past, like the past administration, they just chose not to enforce the law, which I don't know how that's actually legal, but this administration has chosen to enforce the law. But it's the law that's written. And if you don't like the law, don't take it out on the individual officer. He's just doing what he's being ordered to do. And it's nothing he's doing is unlawful. But instead of actually going to the politicians and saying, get up there and change this law, they are rioting against the actual law enforcement officers. And, these are just guys that are just trying to do their job. And I don't understand.
I don't know how much of this is made national news or not, but in the group that's protesting Broadview, you've had a couple city aldermen of Chicago, a couple state representatives. You've got the mayor of Evanston, who's running for Congress. You've got politicians in protesting with these people fueling the fire. West Chicago had, I don't remember if she's a state rep or a senator. She was chasing ICE down the street and saying, get out of my neighborhood, get out of my neighborhood. That is not helping matters. And these people have elected them and continue to elect them. And they get a foothold in a small area, and then they expound out from that small area. And you follow the money behind some of these campaigns. I was looking at one the other day, and we started following the money. One campaign had given money to 3 other campaigns, and in turn, they're swapping funds behind the scenes. So you think you're electing one person, you're electing them, but you're also helping to elect others, and it's a cascade effect.
No, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know much about election law, but I didn't know you could actually share funds like that.
Yep, happens all the time.
Well, there's lots of things that happen in politics that most of us have no idea.
Yep, I got into a pretty good argument about somebody yesterday about something, a political consultant, and they said, well, "There's no way that's happening." Well, we got into it too, and I know them, and they're like, "There's no way that's happening." I'm like, "No, it's happening," and got to the point where I actually had to pull up some information and show them and to prove. They're like, "That's illegal." I'm like, "Well, welcome to Illinois." That's how it works, and they they couldn't believe it.
The amount of money that has literally been cycled from like Washington, D.C. through USAID into NGOs back to different, other NGOs that eventually go to 501c3 that are political campaigns. And it's just the this laundering of the money and the funding that goes into all these people is just absolutely insane.
If you look at them, the way they're structured, there's no difference between NGO and a political campaign. None. They work the same. They launder money the same. They transfer money the same. It works identically. The only big difference between a lot of the NGOs or the nonprofits is the person or people who are in charge typically are taking home a pretty decent salary, and a lot of the money that's supposedly getting donated to those those nonprofits is going towards salary and overhead. It's not going to the end result. Really, people need to look at where they think they're donating their money to. And that goes for the right or the left. look at where your
Yeah.
money and what percentage is going to that cause versus what percentage is going in somebody's pocket.
Oh, yeah, it's ridiculous. But back to our original, we're going on all sorts of tangents,
Yeah.
which is awesome, but I love it. I think a lot of this is driving what you were talking about is people are getting fed up, but most importantly, people are getting scared. I mean, they see a
Absolutely.
lot of this writing, they
For
see a
sure.
lot of this crime, and like I said, I think there's a thread and a theme that kind of goes through the mentality of, I can actually attack an ICE officer for arresting an illegal alien who's a criminal. A lot of these guys are rapists and murderers. You would think even the most hardcore leftists would be okay with a murderer or a rapist being arrested. But for some reason, they have it in their minds that, especially this illegal alien class, they have to be protected. Well, on the same, and you tell me if this thread makes sense. On the same, it's just almost the same mentality that you're looking at this guy that's been arrested 64 times and for multiple violent felonies. For some reason, some of these politicians and judges and people think that that person needs to be protected and kept in society for what? I mean, what asset, what contribution to society? A guy that's getting arrested 64
Right.
times has probably committed 1,000 crimes by then.
Right.
He's only been arrested 64 times.
Right. Because for every one that got arrested for or caught for, there was how many that don't. Same thing with somebody lies.
Yeah.
What's compounding the problem is our laws like the Safety Act. Even if the judge wants to do something, the prosecutors want to do something, they can't. And the laws here now, I would hope they're going to make some modifications, but it's here. And also the people that are for these laws don't realize how out of control it is. Since you would ask the question, I actually looked up and did a Google search this morning on is the Safety Act working? I put a few different search terms in, and a lot of the articles show that it is. If you go and you backtrace the articles where they're coming from, they're old data. The data's wrong. And one reason I chased it down, because you've got the sheriff of Kane County saying, hey, this isn't working. You've got state's attorneys say, hey, this isn't working. But now you've got some reporter with no credentials saying, oh, it's working. And that's what these people that are protesting are going off of. They're going off of those articles, and they're wrong. It's false information. Unfortunately, there's way more false information out there than there is factual information. And I don't know how you stem that curve either. It's what's driving a lot of these people. They don't.
Well, part of it I have to wonder is how they define success. I mean, for some of these people, I actually think that, the only important thing is reducing the prison population.
Yeah, and the only important thing is they get their way. That's the truth. It's their way or there's no way, and there's no changing their thought process. Like we said before, you could put the facts right in front of them, and it's amazing. They'll deny it. They say there's no way that's true. There's no way that's happening, but yet you're looking at it.
Yeah.
Like I said, look at the red line downtown Chicago. It's a freaking death trap. There's stuff going on all the time. It's constant. And another thing you see is people they're just in their life. It's almost like a frog in boiling water on some of it. You put that frog in boiling water, as they say, and you turn up the water and doesn't realize it's boiling. What people have done, especially since COVID, is adjusted their lifestyle. They're like, okay, well, I just won't take the red line. I'll take the bus. Well, okay, I won't take the bus. I'll take an Uber. Okay, well, none of that's safe anymore. I'm just going to walk. Well, okay, it's too far to walk. I'm just going to stay in my neighborhood. Well, now I'm just going to stay home. And this has happened over a few years period, and a lot of them don't even realize what they've sunk into. And it's another trend that how do you reverse it?
So this is something that's really interesting. I have a good friend. His name's Lee Meller, and he's a PhD. He's one of the world's leading necrophilia and, the criminal psychologist that's like the really dark,
Yep.
deep stuff that's just, it's
Twisted.
crime that is so disgusting that most people don't even want to know about it.
Yep.
That's his specialty. So as you can imagine, he's an amazingly deep thinker, and he was evaluating COVID. He said, the interesting thing about COVID was it was actually, most people think that COVID was kind of a trial balloon that they set up to say, how compliant will people be around the world, and specifically Americans for our folks. But they said, even prior to that, the launch of the smartphone has so conditioned us that
Right.
we have almost created a world, a reality within a reality, because how many of us actually, their entire life is inside of their smartphone, whether
Yep.
it's be on social media or, a lot of times you can just, like, you can actually make a living nowadays and never leave your house.
Right.
And that was all enacted and made possible because of technology, and especially with the smartphone. So he said that is the first conditioning, and because we've been conditioned to kind of accept that a lot of social media and all the filters and everything else is actually reality, then once COVID hit, and the lockdowns and all the misinformation, the 6 feet to slow the spread, and all of that kind of stuff that was completely fabricated, it's just absolutely made up.
Yeah.
That was another conditioning. And I'm wondering if, a lot of the stuff that we're seeing nowadays, like, the guy that gets arrested 64 times that we started with, is that just more creating enough chaos that we just kind of are conditioned to accept it.
And
It's
feeling
like
the
the
fire.
guys, the guys in San Francisco, they have that poop app
Yep.
where, if you see a pile of human feces on the street, you just report it. And if you look at it, at that app, you can't even see the city. The entire city is covered.
Right.
And so, but people are so accustomed, they'll get off the train or something, headed to work. They're just literally stepping over bodies, and, people that are passed out on drugs and whatever, and human feces, and they're just stepping around it in order to get to work.
Well, it's like you said,
What
they've
is it?
kind of become accustomed to it, and they've
Yeah.
become conditioned. And social media, if you think about it, social media is driven by time on target. So what they put in your feed, what is going to keep you on social media, and you're back to, I hate to say it, an echo chamber, and your feed is going to continue. Whatever you spend the most time on topic wise, whatever videos you spend on, especially with AI, that's amplified the issue. The person is going to continue to get more and more of that in their feed, and it amplifies that noise coming in, and it amplifies whatever their base opinion was. It just takes it to another level. And AI is at the point now where the things it can predict what you're going to do a year down the road better than you can predict what you're going to do a year down the road. So it's feeding you that information. And if you're looking for information to support what you think or what you believe, that San Francisco, for example, wherever there isn't a problem, and you may be walking over that person, you may be walking over that pile of poop, but in your social media feed, like you said, you're so wound up in it, that feed knows to show you what you want to believe. And if you think about it, it's pretty scary. We're only really a couple of years into AI being where it's at now, and we're a year away from that being able to make a flawless video using anybody's face that you can't tell the difference to put misinformation out. We are on a slippery slope with social media and AI.
Yeah. Well, boy, we could spend all day on that one. That's one of those where I just look at it and I'm like, oh my gosh, Hollywood had it right when they made Terminator, man.
Right. Right. They did.
All these movies like iRobot and Terminator, and you're like, wait a minute, all of you people that are working on AI, so and just plunging ahead with just reckless abandon. Have you never seen these movies?
Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't know how you're going to put any controls on it now. That genie's it's out.
Oh,
You're not reeling it in.
you've ever heard Glenn Beck talk about that?
Briefly, some of his clips.
Yeah, he gets into the different levels of AI, and boy, we're way off in the weeds now. But um,
Yeah, that's another one that's a
it,
topic all of its own.
yeah, it's just the super intelligence and everything. Where I mean, literally, but they're saying that there are some AIs now that if you ask it certain questions, it'll actually defend its own existence, and it's so
Oh,
it's almost becoming self-aware. And so
it,
AI like
yep.
Chat GPT will actually start defending the purpose of Chat GPT existing, which is
It's already there, and it's called jailbreaking. That you can jailbreak it.
yeah.
The safeties they put on it. Matter of fact, I had asked a question the other day on it, and it said that it couldn't answer it because it was against the rules or something. So I mean, I knew what to do. I just reformed it in a different portion, and it's like, woof! There was all the information I wanted to know, and
Yeah.
it had to do with crime. I was researching a topic, and it didn't like the way I asked it, and
Oh, that's
the
crazy.
yeah.
Well, if that's not another reason to get qualified for concealed carry, I don't know what is.
Yeah. Yeah. Like I said, classes for that have been up. And the other thing that's been up is the people that are taking the classes, I'm seeing more of unfortunate fear than I used to. Never used to see that. A lot of people are getting in, took a class because they wanted to, they were into firearms. And now, last few months, the people are more, I'm worried about what's going on in the world. I want to be prepared. Never used to hear that. And that is probably the main motivator of people now versus last year. The motivation has changed.
Well, there's a lot of countries that criticize the United States for having so many weapons, and they always feel that the answer is to just disarm the entire population, which
Right.
frankly will never happen in the United States. I mean, yeah, I don't know how many people I've seen say, I don't have any guns, man. I lost all those in the lake when my boat overturned. And so I just don't have any. And
Well,
well,
Illinois
that's,
had the assault weapons ban, and they're predicting it was like a 5 or 6% compliance rate.
yeah,
Right there, 5 or 6%. So you've got 90 some percent of the people in Illinois that didn't comply that have firearms that are legal under that act. You can't rein it in, and even if you did, the criminals are still going to get guns. They can't stop
right.
drugs.
Yeah,
So
the criminals will
they're going to
always
get
have them, and that,
right,
they proved that even in Australia. When they had
right.
their gun buyback program, um, they said something like 70% of the weapons were never turned in. So,
Well, you got Canada
um,
going through it right now and getting a lot of pushback.
yeah, well, it's just ridiculous. There's a significant portion of the population that'll actually never, uh, because you're just exposing yourself. Like, fortunately, to go back to the original story that you had written on, that the guy that's arrested 64 times, he's breaking into an apartment. The inside the apartment are children,
I was going to say with kids.
and fortunately, a woman that was legally carrying. Do you know what happened to that? So once this guy is killed, was that woman arrested? Was she just set go? Was
Something.
it?
There's one thing I'm going to give Chicago and Illinois credit for. If you have your CCL, if there's been anything questionable, they've erred on the side of the CCL holder. There was a case recently where a guy shot somebody in self-defense, did not have a CCL in parking lot. They took him to jail. The cases where somebody's had a valid CCL, they've sided with the person with the license. I've got my theories about it, but they've been good as long as you go through their process. What will their process be in the future? Who knows? But as long as you stay within the laws, they've been pretty good about it.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, at least there's a glimmer of hope then in the middle of that. So, for any of you that are listening to us and this conversation, again, there's so many different topics that we've kind of hit on, but ultimately, it's this. I think the entire atmosphere of the country right now is boiling down to just a few things, and number one is that evil exists. It is out there. And if you are not prepared for it, not only in awareness, but also, physically prepared for it, then there's a good chance it's going to get you. And um, as much as I hate, even bringing that up, it's a reality.
You know what?
And
It's not limited to one area. Naperville is one of the biggest cities in Illinois, and they are always rated as one of the safest cities. They have a
Mhm.
top golf location, and I stopped keeping track at like 32 illegal firearms that they've caught people with in the parking lot. So you're talking about supposedly safest cities in America, but the PD is doing a great job of catching these people. But in a little over a year, 30 some people in one parking lot that have come in from other areas. And last time I charted it, the closest drive was 20 minutes. So they're not local. They're coming from other suburbs and downtown. They're
Mhm.
coming out to the burbs to commit these crimes. You're just not hearing about it in the news. I can guarantee you there's carjackings going on, and there's armed robberies, and you're not hearing about it. They're happening in your own neighborhood.
Yeah. Well, there's also, unregistered pedophiles and all sorts of
Yeah.
crazy people that, it may not be just breaking into your home. Your kids are at risk and everything else. I'm not here to try to be an alarmist, but at the same time, I think the age of being naive and just assuming that it's a little house on the prairie and, we're all okay and everybody's, just skipping along down the country road, those days are gone.
Yeah, they're
You
going.
can't have the mentality that uh, you're always safe. I mean, obviously, you can't also live just in a perpetual state of fear, but at the same time, um, I'm always talking to friends of mine that are female, that are athletic, that are jogging and stuff. I'm like, take those earbuds out of your ears. You
Right.
cannot run with headphones, especially if you're running alone down a park path, and always assume that you're safe.
The biggest
Lincoln
one I see
Riley.
is the biggest one
Go
I see
ahead.
are people on their cell phones. One of the videos I review, number
Hmm.
one thing, 4 out of 5 incidents are probably preventable, and the majority of the videos that I see, somebody was on their cell phone or looking at the ground and weren't paying attention.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I just, it's crazy the amount of time that we spend staring at our screen. Well, and that's again another just because they're not in reality, they're not paying attention to what's
Right.
actually around them, and the self awareness of understanding what the threats are around you. And it doesn't take long. You can look up from your screen every 10 seconds and just kind of scan the area around.
Right.
Just make sure that you're not vulnerable, and especially if you are vulnerable, if you're a smaller female, my gosh, you are the number one target, and
Right.
these people just don't. I don't know. Self awareness is just a rare thing nowadays.
That and common sense.
Isn't that the truth?
Yeah.
That's sad.
Yep.
We just don't teach it anymore. And how can we get back to that, Brian?
I spend as much time teaching common sense as I do firearms these days. I go through a lot of videos. I've taken the clips and combined them down into shorter segments and just show people, look, if you just kept your eyes open and just paid attention, uh, you'd be a lot safer. These criminals are looking for easy targets. Don't be the easy target. And if you're just looking up, if you look somebody straight in the eye, a lot of times that's all it takes. Just let them know that you're there. Don't have a stare down contest, but just, hey, one of these, I acknowledge they exist. Everybody says, "Oh, a criminal's stupid." You know what? They're dumb, but they're street smart, and some are smart all the way around. Their reptilian brain still works. They still are sizing up a people. That they're still subconsciously looking at you. A lot of them probably don't even realize they're doing it, and in under a fraction of a second, they're like, "Okay, well, this is my target or not my target." Just don't look like one. It was a
Yeah.
study I was watching or read about the other day. They were talking about people's gait, or how far their steps apart were, and the people that walked with confidence were less likely to get attacked or robbed than the people who were short steps, looking at the ground. We've all seen it. People are kind of hunched together like they're afraid. That's what a criminal is looking for. And you don't have to live in a state of fear. A lot of things I do, I don't even realize I do them anymore. My friends tell me that all the time. I'll say go around a car because there's a particular group in front of me. I'm not changing my lifestyle. It's second nature. I don't think twice about it, and it's just being safe. You never know where it's going to happen, and some of the nicest neighborhoods around that's what the criminals are coming into because they know that people aren't paying attention.
Yeah, and if they have this natural assumption of safety that doesn't actually exist, then
It's even worse.
that's a huge problem.
Yep.
So, there's going to be a fair number of people that actually are never really going to be comfortable with firearms. Are there, alternative methods like, the saber launcher or something like that you recommend?
Pepper spray, but get trained with it. It doesn't take a lot how to use one. The Brenna launcher, I got mixed feelings on. It does a projectile. Reason is it looks like a firearm. So if you pull it out, especially in the dark, you've got a firearm shaped weapon. And if you're going to use it, you still need to be somewhat proficient. You've got to get to that device. You've got to pull out the device. You've got to draw it. As far as other devices, again, it goes back to common sense. If I had to tell somebody to do anything or buy anything, go get some common sense lessons. Go get some training on what to look for is probably your best protection. Honestly, all of these things we're talking about, you can go get any weapon you want, but if you're not paying attention and you don't know how to use it, it's not going to do you any good.
Right. Oh, that's 100%. Yeah. It goes all the way back to, like I said, my days in the military in the 90s. It's like, if you don't train on whatever weapon system you're looking at or whatever protection you're considering, if you don't train with it on a regular basis, at least every few months, then it's all it is just an object that supposedly you would pick up and, you may as well just use the handle as a hammer kind of thing as to actually use it as a weapon.
Right. And another thing I tell students and people, when I'm giving a lecture, have you talked to your spouse? Have you talked to your friend? I'm amazed, especially as concealed carry holders, if you had a discussion with your wife or husband, if you're carrying a firearm, who's taking the lead? What's the other person supposed to do? And it usually comes into other conversations. It's like, okay, now's the time to think about these things, not when things go downhill and something goes wrong. Think about it now. Have a plan, have an idea of what people are going to do. And I usually get this look like, wow, I never thought of that. And that right there, a lot of times gets people thinking. And I know they go home and they think about it further. Sometimes it's just planting these little seeds in ways that they can relate to or understand.
Well, sure. There's a neighborhood, emergency catastrophe type of a plan, but even within your family, it's like,
right.
If something happens like an earthquake, out here in Utah, that's supposedly the next big natural disaster it's overdue for that.
I did not know that.
Quake. And if that happens, what is each one of your kids, if your kids are at school and that happens, what are they supposed to do? Have you talked to them about it?
Right.
Have you discussed what the plan is? How are you going to regain communication? And that's all of that is critically important. And I think, again, personal safety is just one of those that, like you said, it's a matter of actually putting together a plan and formulating in your mind what you would do, how you would react to certain situations. And if you haven't actually ever gone through that exercise, it's a good, especially and get with a professional like you and actually discuss it. And so what's when you're talking common sense, what are some of the main points that you talk about?
One of the big things for common sense is, have you thought about it? We just went over that. A lot of people just haven't even thought of it. It hasn't crossed their mind that I should even have a plan for this. and then I'll pull out examples of things that have happened locally or videos that have happened locally, and said, okay, well, it's already happened. You just didn't realize it. Cell phones, again, we've all been so dependent on it. It's going to be one of the first things to go. What do you do if your cell phone goes dead? What about a spare battery pack? So a lot of the things come back to just getting people in the thought process. It's related to also crime. Getting the process. Do we really have a problem? Don't believe everything you see in the news. Look at your news article. Was that news article, the data or whatever they based it on, was it current, or does it goes back to 2019, 2008 in some cases? It's just the discussion, the thought process. A lot of people, it hasn't occurred to them. So to get common sense going, a lot of times it's just getting people to use their brain. Like we've talked, we've become so dependent on cell phones and be dependent on, hey, I'm just going to look up the information, or I'm going to look up this map, or I'm going to look up a phone number. And I know even for myself, I used to be able to remember numbers in my head, and I don't because it's in my phone, and it's terrible. It's terrible. And
yeah.
We've just got to restructure our lives and look at things differently.
Oh, if that EMP ever goes off and just fries everybody's cell phone, and we're all of a sudden we're just standing around staring at each other, that's going to be an interesting day.
Yeah, and that's another one we could talk about. You look at the infrastructures. The company I owned for 20 some years was an internet company, and people do not realize how fragile our infrastructure is, and how easy it'd be to take down a big portion of the internet or the electricity for a city. Very easy. We've come way too dependent and reliant on these devices, and who knows? I don't remember who it was the other day was just talking about how many people from Al-Qaeda or these other groups could be in the country right now. And you figure even if it's a few hundred of them, the havoc they could create. I'm not sitting here talking about anything that's a secret. These people could carry this out tomorrow if they wanted to. It's simple stuff to do. So again, it's have a plan. Have a plan.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's lots of information out there. And Brian, let's talk about you have a website where you publish a lot of this information.
Biggest following where we have the best discussions, like you said, is LinkedIn. You can Google me and put in Let's Talk DGU, stands for Defensive Gun Use. And you'll see my articles that I've written. They're all over the place. That's probably the best way to do it. Just put in hashtag Let's Talk DGU and hundreds of things will come up.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, like I said, it's a matter of if you think about really what could happen, and I don't know, maybe most people just don't even want to think about it. They want to go on with their little life that is kind of sheltered, and it's kind of whether it's pseudo or reality.
There's truth to that. There's a lot of truth to that. It's easier to think it's not going to happen and avoid the subject than to realize that there's a possibility. You're right.
Well, I think the more people realize that it is a possibility, the more self-awareness that they would have. And then that actually reduces the chance that it ever would happen.
Exactly.
So what's we'll make sure to publish those notes in there, and again, great. I'd say reiterate that sentence you finished your LinkedIn post with, and say, everybody needs to get acquainted at least with firearms, because ultimately that is going to be your best line of defense, is understanding at least something about firearms.
Yeah, even if you're not going to own one, learn how to use one. Like you said in that post, there was a case right there where the guy got the criminal's firearm and used it against it. And that's not an isolated case. It's happened a lot. I think everybody should. I think kids should learn. There's no downside to it. Zero downside to learning how to use one.
100% agree. Brian, it has been fascinating, man. I'll have to have you on again. We can.
Yeah, we went off on some tangents there.
Yeah, But you know what? That's it's always fun. I love this type of format just because you know what? Different people have different mindsets, and you know where the conversation goes. As long as it's relevant, then go with it, man. I love that.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us. Your attention today brings us one step closer to exposing and eliminating the evil that brings crime to our communities. Hit subscribe and share this episode. Together, we will bring justice to every victim.